Hey there, Foster Fierce family. Welcome to Interview with a Foster Kid, where we dive into the raw and unapologetic stories of Foster Fierce alumni, driven by a passion for creating a better future for our foster siblings around the world. I'm your host, Amira Therese, and I want to hear your story too. If you're ready to share, reach out to me at iwafosterkid@gmail.com, and don't hold back. We tell stories on this show so honest, they'll make your caseworkers blush. Now it's time for our next Foster Fierce episode. Listen mindfully and please enjoy. Hey there, Foster Fierce family. I am back with another episode of Interview with a Foster Kid. I'm your host, Amira Therese, and today's episode is going to be a little bit different. Today, we don't have a Foster Fierce alumni. We have a Foster Fierce father. This is a foster father who is well-loved, and that's kind of an angle I want to hear from, because I grew up, and a lot of my siblings grew up with foster family that, maybe we don't have the nicest things to say about. So it's always good to have somebody on the show who is an advocate, also a fierce supporter of entrepreneurs. He runs the Pro Design Builder podcast and is always welcoming new entrepreneurs, developers, real estate agents onto his show to grow your audience and to learn. Sam, welcome to the show. I was just on yours, but for those of our audience that don't know of you, tell us a bit about yourself.
So my name is Sam. I grew up in South Florida. I was born on the island of Haiti, which is an interesting story. And
we're going to that one. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to dive into it. And I grew up in the middle of the hood. I grew up around foster kids. I was in dropout prevention. I think a lot of my life experience brings a lot of perspective to the table, and that's kind of what allows me to be the best, dad, foster dad, adoptive dad, that I am. Yeah. So, yep.
Well, something I find curious, because I know a little bit about your story leading into it, but I'd like you to tell people what led to your drive, your dedication to helping children.
I mean, life happened, struggle happened, life, that's kind of the best way to describe it. And I think part of it is once you've gotten a taste, which all of your foster, alums, you have an understanding that, something needs to be different. And then for myself, I know what was missing and lacking in my life as a kid and things that I hope for. And that's kind of what I bring to the table as a parent now, is I bring those life experiences, those positions of lack, that I have an understanding. And then also too, right now, it sounds crazy, but I'm like watching real childhood for the first time, right? At least that's just how I feel, based on life experiences, so, I get joy from that. My life experiences did not look like what theirs look like, which is okay, but it's feeling that place that I didn't have, So
I love that perspective. It's so powerful. Just the way that you worded it. I was, for the first time, watching a childhood the way it should be. And you were providing that. And I mean, that is what drives us. It's what drives us to do a lot of things, the things that we lacked in our own lives, and the things that we didn't want to see happen to anybody else, or the things that maybe we wanted to see better for other people. And then to go forward and do it, though. That's the difference, okay? That's what the difference that you made. Because a lot of us, and I don't judge anybody who does, that trauma can shut us down. I know myself, I get very triggered. I would be a bad foster parent, not for the kid, but for the system. So it takes a lot. Tell us a little bit about your experience coming from Haiti. That's intriguing to me, and I really can't move past it.
For sure, it's a story and a half for sure. Right. So I was born in Haiti. And during the time that, we came to the U.S., through political asylum. So my dad was a pilot in the, Haitian military, but at the time they were, it was a dictatorship. During the time there was a shift in the government. There was a coup happening, and what was happening is they were killing people that were part of the former government. And they were stuffing them in the tires and burning them alive. My brother is about 7 years older, 6 or 7 years older than me. Yeah, I was a baby. So, and he actually witnessed, people be, burned alive. It's a very different world. So it gives me,
Insane.
perspective, and it gives me appreciation no matter what my circumstance is, and understanding that this was my starting place, right?
Yeah.
And then my starting place was super chaotic, and although I don't remember, any of those things, I do remember what that very beginning was when we landed here in the US and starting all over and being in the
Yeah.
middle of the hood during the crack epidemic, and, the activity, the people, the amount of hatred I was met with for being from another country,
Yeah.
all of it. It was very, very challenging. I couldn't really kind of rationalize, what life was about, and it was very disoriented for sure. That's
Certainly
kind
isn't
of
the dream they're selling.
no,
So,
no, no, no. It's extremely imperfect, right? But I
yeah.
realize that perfection is a gift. So that's kind of why I use my voice now to kind of speak about some different things.
I
So
love that. And you're supporting, I follow you more than you might know, but I just love the way that you talk to people. It is always, you're a mentor. I mean, the way that you talk to people, it's very encouraging, empowering, respectful. So I can see you going far. And if anybody isn't following the Pro Design Builder podcast, do so, especially if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're trying to get out there, especially if you're trying to learn, okay? Because there's
yeah,
so much to learn. I'll let you real
correct.
quick, if you want to say a little bit about that, you can say it best.
Yeah, yeah. So the Pro Design Builder is multifaceted, and it's like that for a reason. Everybody has a story. Everybody's story is very different. Everybody's story has challenges, has hurdles, and mistakes, has lessons learned in there. And then at the end, we tie it all in a bow with business and how some of these experiences and stuff like that has helped you persevere through, launching different businesses or whatnot. So it's like I said, it's multifaceted. It's great on personal growth, personal development, mental health aspects of going through challenging situations in life and kind of growing from it. Obviously, there's a spiritual aspect to it as well. I'm all about, obviously, I talked about, where life began for me. Right. And I know the growth and the challenges and the hurdles and the mental, aspect that I had to overcome. And then now I'm just kind of using and leveraging that to kind of just help others, and also understand that you're not alone. Right. You're not
Yeah.
you're not by yourself in this battle.
I love that. I want to talk more about that lived experience and then how it turned into you becoming a foster father. And I just mentioned this. I had
Hmm.
Tristan Smith on recently, and I brought up the
Yes. Yes.
movie Shazam. Okay, Shazam
Uh-huh.
with that's Goofy, the big goofy superhero, but he's a foster kid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think of you when I think of that show, that lived experience, having the foster
Hmm.
parents who not just understand trauma, but experienced it. And I mean, when I first came onto your podcast, I could not believe how
Yep.
easy it was to relate to you. I mean, you're a foster
Yeah.
parent. We're not supposed to,
For
not in
sure.
my experience. And I just
Yeah.
thought it was such a blessing that you are in charge of the care of some of my foster siblings. And I'd like to hear more about that.
When I think back about, about myself as a kid, and some of the situations that I seen and was in, I was in a, drug filled environment where people were like zombies walking around in the street,
Yeah.
and there was something that happened, life altering things that happen, on a daily on a daily basis. There was a shooting every night, each and every night, and I explain to you kind of what that looks like. So there was a shooting every night, and the reason why is because obviously they were dealing drugs, and the way that it would happen is, someone would come to the car, someone have drugs in their hand, and be like, "Which ones do you want?" And then they might go, "I want all of them." Hit their hand, all of them will fall in, and then they'll pull off and drive, and then next thing you know, there's a shooting. Right.
Well,
And I just remember in the third grade, I was standing at a bus stop one day, and what happened was my back was to the street, and then I hear this engine rev up, and then I hear this sound, this sound, and then when I turned around, there was a car at a high rate of speed, and then there was a lady holding onto the car, being dragged on her knees, right? And I
oh my
remember
God.
this blows past the stop sign, right? And she's holding on this whole time. She finally lets go, and she rolls, and then the car ends up, turning a right, past the street. And then our bus came probably just a couple minutes, after that. And then we were all just kind of watching and in shock. And this was the type of activity I was around. And because of that, I wasn't thriving in school. I wasn't doing well. I had multiple facets of things happening. So I was in dropout prevention, and in dropout prevention is the quote unquote bad kids, right?
Yeah.
But it's the kids that got stuff going on at home. There's
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
real life happening around everybody. So it was group home kids, it was foster kids, it was kids that their parents were on drugs or different things. And in my instance, we didn't have the drugs in the home, but we're coming from a different country. There's language barriers, things that don't make sense to you, but it's just,
Right.
I wasn't able to but those were my friends, right? Those are the people that I connected with, and those are the stories and stuff like that I remember. And what it does for me, that's an advantage. I didn't know it was an advantage in the beginning, is when a kid comes into care and we are reading through their CRR, I can literally kind of place myself in their shoes, right? And then because I'm very intentional, and I have a very nurturing wife and motherly wife, we could kind of like formulate the plan to kind of get them healed and off to the best start. So so when you mention how hard it is to kind of give them back, and for me, I probably have like 30 or 40 different situations or dreams that are harder than actual foster care. It just puts it into perspective, than giving them back. It just puts things into perspective when I meet a challenge. Like, is it I measure a challenge sometimes is it life-threatening? That's kind of how I measure it. If it's not life-threatening, there's a solution that's gonna come. It may take some time, but that's just kind of my thought process.
And it's so hard, actually, and I'll say this as a former foster child. It is really hard to gauge our behavior. It does take a strength. I mean, you don't know what we're coming from. I had a
Correct.
grandmother who taught me how to use and aim a .38 ROTC special at the age of 8 years old in case my mother showed up on the property because they had a rival.
Wow.
So you don't know who you're letting in. Me, on the other hand, I'm not somebody that wants to hurt somebody, but you wouldn't know that with my warning label. So you do have to, I come with a pretty heavy duty warning label, cuidado. So
I do too.
yeah. So, and I relate to that. Our dropout prevention in school was called ISS, and I think that they still have it. I didn't go. I wasn't one of those high schoolers that went class to class. I was in ISS because they were afraid I was going to start something on fire. So, those are, so as a foster parent, though, knowing the extremes, you've seen the extremes, where you're from, how you've grown up, and now as a foster father, what goes through your mind when bringing in a new child? How do you read their paperwork? Because there are so many labels. Labels prevented me from so many things. How do you see past that?
So there's a couple things. One, we don't use labels.
Good. In your home. Good.
in my home or allow people to label my children. We just don't do that because it happened to me. I was labeled dumb and operating in a space where I think I'm actually not that smart. But the reality is I've consumed in the last few years, over $100 and clearly I'm articulate. So I clearly wasn't
Absolutely.
dumb. And, in the Bible, it says there's power in the tongue to lift up or destroy. So,
Yeah.
so for me, I'm very conscious of, speaking life into my children, praying over them, praying their future and their vision, because it takes time for you to feel safe, right? And that comes with consistency, comes with structure, it comes with repetitive, actions and stuff like that. And, you get there, you get there through time, so I'll kind of walk you a little bit through my twins. I adopted them.
Oh.
My kind of story, with them. I remember in the beginning, I was, we kind of have a system pattern. Like we have dinner, brush your teeth, watch TV, and then at the end, we would pray. And they after the prayer, my wife would go, "All right, say goodnight to daddy." Or whatever, right? It's just that like they'll bolt out the room, right? They didn't care nothing nothing about that, right? So for a while, that had, I had gotten frustrated, and I'm kind of like, damn, why? And then because we do a lot of training and stuff like that, you have to like get on their levels. Since we take younger kids, get on their level, play with them, get down on the floor, hang out down there and stuff like that. But now, if you see them now, they love them some daddy, right?
I love that. It
They
takes
do because
time. They don't know
they
when
don't.
a lot of times we know who cares about us and who doesn't, but really we
Yeah,
don't know who's going to be there for us. Okay. We don't
correct.
know.
Right.
I had a lot of people say, "This is your home." And my immediate thought was, "This is your home. This is a house.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
isn't my home. This is
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
house." Like, I'm not,
Hmm.
I actually love, and I cling on to these little things where you said dinner, brush your teeth, and then TV time. I actually had
Yeah.
most of them. The foster
Hmm.
kids weren't allowed to watch TV. So they would have
Jeez.
family movie night. And this isn't just one or two. And when the TV went
Mm.
on, we were supposed to be outside or in our rooms. So that was for one of my foster fathers, that was his sign. So
Oh, wow.
we heard the TV go on, we left the room. That was his time. And so it became such a big deal when he would say, "Hey guys, why don't you come in and watch it?" Like it was this weird manipulative. So those are the little
Yeah.
things that me as a foster kid cling on to when you
Yeah.
said that dinner, brush your teeth, and then TV time. It just seems so family
Hmm.
and so wholesome.
For sure.
You mentioned training, and I just want to touch on that. There are things that they train you on that you're just like, that's not what this kid needs. I know that for a fact because I was one of those kids that they were trained to deal with. They weren't allowed to
Hmm.
say, "I'll see you next week," because that's a promise they might break. They weren't allowed to tell me
Hmm.
that they loved me, and they weren't allowed to hug me. So I don't know.
What?
And I just wrote an article on that. How do
I
you
don't.
feel about those things?
I don't get that kind of training. I didn't
Good.
receive that kind of training. No, 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 no. Our whole thing is we want to be a safe place, right? While you're here and kind of envelop you into our family culture, our family systems, and how we do things, and it is safer. And I had this talk one time to different foster families, and explaining to them that they're coming from a very different normal. A lot of times it is traumatic. So some of the things that you're witnessing and experiencing, in your home with your child, just understand and know that this is coming from their normal and they're also their lived experience, right? So when you take a child into your home and you go, "I don't understand why it's not flowing," just understand that this is the perspective that you're missing. But I could bring that to the table because I lived it, right? Really, my strategy is we are not going to adjust to them because they're coming from trauma. They have to adjust to kind of us, our family systems, and kind of how we fluid and operate. And the good thing is the kids are fully bought in, right? So it's not just us as adults. The kids are also nurturing, coaching, and bringing, kids along as well. And it's kind of beautiful, to watch.
Wow, you're creating something wholesome in a situation that just it honestly sounds magical. It doesn't sound, I mean, coming from me, it just,
Hmm.
it warms my heart so much to hear these stories because, I don't hear a lot of them. There are too
Hmm.
few of you. There are too few of you. There are too few of those values. But I want to talk about something that kind
Go
of
for it.
got brought up when I was chatting with another alumni the other day. So we were talking about autonomy and identity. I know you have such a nurturing place and you come from a space of lived
Hmm.
experience, which is undoubtedly the most masterful you can be at anything.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with the transition of the kids that maybe they don't want to fall completely into certain practices or certain structures? What do you do to ease them into that?
Fortunately, we haven't had this experience because
Okay.
typically because we take in babies. So I will take in older children at some point. I just wanted to make sure that my kids are in, in the right place, for that.
Yes.
I probably would do, much older. And my whole thing has always, it still is and has always been, um, I'm a free will guy, right? You have the free will to do, say, operate, how you want. Through my experiences, this is where, God has led me. So this
Yeah.
is kind of how I function and operate, right? But I do, I understand everybody's, perspective. But like I said, I take in younger kids, so I don't have that same exact, experience to truly reference.
I want to actually, that's a great point, and I'm glad that you brought it
Hmm.
up.
Yeah.
Having foster kids while you still have biological children, I think it's so important that what you're doing, you're taking in the younger ones. That really does bring in your biological children to be a part of that community. And we have to understand, because I remember growing up hating the bio kids, okay?
Hmm.
But they had their own rooms. They were setting it up the way
Yeah.
that they wanted it. They had TV time. They could open the
Hmm.
refrigerator and get whatever they wanted. But if I did it, it was theft. They had that
Hmm.
special attention, those hugs that we craved, and it was
Yeah.
hard to watch. So I'm loving what you're saying. I'd like to have you go in a little bit more on what it's been like, just a little more detail on why you chose the younger kids with your biological kids, because I think a lot of foster parents need to consider
Hmm.
this. They need to take it
Yeah.
into consideration. We could influence your children, they could influence us.
Hmm.
There's jealousy, there's issues when I'm a teenager with your teenager. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about that choice that you made and how it's working.
So the twins are 6, and I adopted them, but we met them when they were 11 months. So we have been around for years and years and years. It took like 3.5 years of they were with another foster home, but we raised our hand early and said that we would adopt them if it went that route. And so for the next several years, every other weekend, we would kind of like watch them over the weekend. Right. So
That's
like
awesome.
twice a month. So much so that they called us Utter Mommy, Utter Dottie, and then the family that they're with was Utter Mommy, Utter Dottie too, right? So they had
Oh.
two Utter Mommies and Utter Dotties. But and then we end up making the foster family their godparents. So that's just kind of
Oh
how we kind
wow.
of
I'm
brought it all
sorry,
together.
Sam. I have to say so. I'm honestly blown away. These are not common stories. I want my audience to understand something. We need more
Yeah.
of this as foster kids. I did not experience this life, and I am so
Yeah.
grateful that there are siblings out there who are. But please go on. I couldn't keep I needed my eyebrows to go down, so my words had to come out.
So we've been watching and kind of nurturing them, and then we had gotten pregnant. So we had foster kids in our house before, but then when our son came, he was like by himself, for a few months while we still go through the process of every other week, kind of watching them. So my son has always kind of grew up. He don't know anything outside of them, and then they became permanent. So then it was 3, and then now we have a baby that 23 months now. It's about to be 2 as well. So this is all that he knows. It's important for me because we do this thing called Kids Night Out.
Okay.
And that's where other foster families come together. We get our adult alone time, and then the kids kind of get to be together and have fun in their section. And it's always been important
That's
for
fun.
me and for my son to know, understand every type of person coming from Haiti, how we're seen and how we're looked at, and
Yeah.
we're looked down upon by society. It's a similar feeling that foster kids, have, and not being able to have a voice. And we do foster, we do homeless outreach. And that's something that I've been doing for a very long time, personally, because when you grew up the way I did, and I grew up around a lot of there's a lot of homeless people. They're mainly harmless, and also too, there's always a story there, and that's something I mentioned before. It comes first with the breakdown of a family, and
Yeah.
then the trauma, and then the mental health, and then the homelessness and the drugs, right? It's just, that's the typical pattern. And then
Yeah.
also the pattern too is a lot of, foster kids end up homeless because they don't have that parental support or that family support, right?
Right.
It's so, I take them with me to do that kind of work, and to kind of, talk to people, and kind of get their stories, and also just be human, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I feel like we're lacking as people, is we lost this human element.
Yeah.
And and I have that, and I want to instill that in my kids.
Now, I feel like it's lightly put, but we're losing our humanity. I mean, and it's everywhere. Just the things, and I'm not going to get into it, but the things, the ideas that we're struggling with, protocols, policies, what we're going through, that's not human. And it just,
Hmm.
yeah. I want to talk a little bit. I want to touch on what you said about taking your kids to feed the homeless and to help the homeless. I actually,
Yep.
2015, took my kids, thought it was going to be this amazing, because I've been homeless. I mean, I've lived in Greyhound bus
Hmm.
station bathrooms and wherever they wouldn't kick me
Yep.
out, or
Yep.
outside. So my kids, though, we fight, those of us who want to break the cycle, to never allow our children to experience what we experienced.
Correct.
Sometimes to the extreme that they turn into little people that we don't really relate to. Like,
Correct.
how the
Right.
heck are you crying over this? I used to live outside, so I had to
Yeah,
really, but
exactly.
I decided to bring my kids. I started with a film crew. I was in the Arizona film community pretty deeply, and
Hmm.
we did the satchel up movement. And I thought, I'm going to bring my kids, I'm going to open their eyes. And we were
Yep.
bringing satchels of toys for people going to different shelters. And then, but for the homeless, the ones
Yep.
outside, blankets and
Hmm.
food, dry food, and things like that. My kids were awful. They're everything we gave away. They're like, I wanted that. And I'm like, guys, trying to give them this message. Of course, they were about 5 or 6, but yeah, it didn't really hit the note that I was hoping it would hit with them.
This hit the note, and it
Good.
comes up. It comes up in their prayers too. Actually, it came up last night. My daughter mentioned about feeding people and stuff like that.
Oh my
It,
God.
what it did for me is, well, I'll tell you what happened. So there was a lack of appreciation by my daughter. That's kind of how it first happened, that I brought her with me. And my wife was frustrated. She's like, yeah, she just doesn't appreciate anything. She thinks life is about herself, and,
Yeah.
this and this and that. And then I was like, all right, I know how we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it through serving, right? And she goes, Daddy, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I was like, you'll see. We just got to serve. Like, this is how, we operate, right? And then, so we go out there, a backpack of cookies and a whole bunch of other stuff, right? With notes in it and a bunch of stuff. And then hygiene kits, right? And then once we get out there, they almost like swarmed her, and then she kind of froze, right?
Yeah.
She like froze. And I was like, say good morning. Say good morning to everybody, right? And she was kind of frozen, right? But we gave everything out, and there was multiple reasons why I did that. One, I'm able to share parts of my story a little bit easier with her, in telling her, hey,
Sure.
listen, this is around the type of people that Daddy grew up around. Everybody got a story. Sharing part of her story, that her mom was homeless at one point, and when you guys were pregnant, this is kind of like where life began. So and then also too, once we were done, and people had smiles on their faces and stuff like that, and then we went out to breakfast, I go, did you see how appreciative they were for the small things? And she
Yeah.
goes, yeah. I was like, don't you think you should be more appreciative? And she
Yeah.
goes, yeah. All right. So
Oh,
that's what I'm trying to teach you. Right. So it was small, but it set in to understanding that, life could be very different.
yeah. And I want to
It could be
say,
very different for you.
just for everybody listening, those little things that Sam did with his daughter, I was one of those people. Okay. And we are invisible unless we're being pointed at or chastised. And it's amazing, actually. I remember because I was homeless before I was an adult too, but after foster care, I mean, I
Yep.
had and during when I was 17, I was homeless for quite a while, and everybody treated me as an adult, which I wasn't.
Hmm.
But those things, I remember when I was a kid and we were homeless, and my mom, there was this big white trailer that pulled up, and these two guys got out of it, goofy looking guys, and they're just super happy. One had to have played Santa Claus at the mall. Like that's his job. Like I guarantee it.
Yep.
And they
Uh-huh.
handed us each kid that was out there. I mean, it was a homeless encampment, basically, like an old
Hmm.
cement building that had no enclosures, but there was just kind of like outside in cement
Yep.
buildings, and you had your own little corner. And these guys
Hmm.
pulled up and they had this trailer, and they gave each of us a grocery bag or two grocery bags. They said, one's for hygiene items, go in there, get whatever you want, fill up the bag. And
Hmm.
I was like,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
is that theft? Like, whatever I want, like as much, not one of
Hmm.
each, or,
Yeah.
and they're like, go crazy. I don't care. We'll get more. And they said, but this bag, this is special. This bag is for the other side of the trailer. This is only for toys. I don't want to see a single toothbrush in this bag. Fill it up with toys.
Hmm.
And it was an
Yeah.
amazing, I was 7 and I remember
Hmm.
that day. So just for the audience, those things serving, that's so important, life changing. I wanted to be like the people helping me, not like the people that were homeless with me. It was inspiring,
Correct.
and it propelled me forward. So when you see an opportunity to help, don't allow your cynicism. And believe me, I am full of cynicism. Okay. We could have a cynical conversation all day long, and I would thoroughly enjoy it. But don't allow your
Hmm.
cynicism to negate your humanity. Okay. Help
Hmm.
people. And thank you so much for sharing that, Sam. But
No, for sure.
I kind of want to go into a little bit more of your mission. I mean, you're a foster father and you've been doing this for years. You're a
Yep.
podcaster, you're a real
Hmm.
estate developer. You're doing a lot of things,
Yep.
but I see you constantly putting yourself out there, opening yourself up
Hmm.
to free lessons, education, whatever you can do to propel
Yep.
people.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
so I don't know a better person to ask. What can we do? What can our audience do? Little things like that, big things, give them an itinerary of a day of service.
A day of service. It all starts with, which is challenging. It all starts with just softening up your heart. Similar to, for a very long time, I was very angry, based on, all of life's, circumstances, and I had to unlearn, so to speak, everything that I had to equip myself with for safety and survival, right? And then, putting myself in a place where, it's okay to feel things. It's okay to love people. And that's taken a long time. And I thank my wife for, kind of helping me get to that place, because she was probably one of the first and only people, when she kind of heard my whole story, that just never judged me and was just kind of like, well, he's there's something there about him, but he has
Yeah,
this stuff on me, right?
yeah,
And for me, the more that, I chase, my relationship with, God, with Jesus and what he represented, the more I'm able to fully feel like my, true self. Because, and I mentioned having all of this stuff and this survival stuff, right? You're picking up all of this energy,
right.
all the way all around you, right? Fallen people, drugs, crime, all of it, right? You're picking up all of that stuff, right? And
Yeah.
you're equipping yourself with all of those things, for survival, right? And you have to find a way to kind of shed that stuff, right? And hey, these things happen to me. I'm not going to allow it to control me moving forward. What's one area that I can focus on that I want to get better in, right? And then what I started doing is I started asking myself, I'll pick an area every year, right? And work on it. I started asking myself when I picked the area, where did this come from? Did this come from survival, or did I equip myself with this thing for a specific reason? And what do I want it to look like? Right.
Yeah.
And I'll work towards making the change, of
Yeah.
that particular thing. Because I mean, you could probably relate, and probably everybody could relate to what I'm
Mm,
talking about.
Not everybody, because not everybody is
Not
where you
everybody.
are right now. I
Well,
mean,
not where I'm at to make changes, right? But just could relate with equipping yourself with something, and then what typically happens is people are not able to identify that a change may be needed,
right.
right?
You are somebody who needs to write a book because not everybody even thinks about that enough to relate to it.
Hmm.
You really hit me with something just now because I was in denial that I was in survival mode for 20 years after foster care, but it was just, a continuation of foster care. So I didn't make any changes. I had no job longevity. I liked a fast and radical life, and I couldn't slow down. When I did, I would somehow my inner saboteur would go into action. Getting caught in lies because I couldn't tell the truth about my who I was, and then coming back for that. There weren't a lot of understanding people. They're like, "Wait,
Correct,
what's your
correct,
name?
correct, correct, correct.
Like, which name did I
Hmm.
give you?" I don't know. I have a lot of stories.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
so I think it would be great, just that understanding, recognizing that you're still in survival mode after you don't have to be,
Hmm.
and
Correct.
there's a lot to that I think you could unpack because you nailed it. I mean, we carry that for a long time, and it does. There's a
We
lot of
do.
anger. We carry our anger
There's a lot
too,
of
and then
anger. There's a
society
lot of
doesn't
anger. Yeah.
help. Because now we're
No.
just it's just
No.
unloading on us, and we weren't given the coping skills or the
Hmm.
self management skills to deal with what we have to age into, or what, no matter if we're foster kids or not, we're aging into an
Correct.
adulthood that is a
Hmm.
perpetuation of survival of our childhood.
It is, and that's where I feel like it starts. It starts there. And then once you're able to kind of start shedding these things about life, and I could relate to the anger. I've been in probably over like 60, 70 fights, just cuz it
Yeah.
went from being like extremely fearful
Yeah.
to, I'm not afraid of anything, right?
Yeah.
And if you had something to say, and wanted to fight, you wanted to trash me, just bam, 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 bam. I was a fight or a fighter, right? I'm
Fight or
not
fight.
I'm not freezing. So if you do something to me, I'm gonna one up and do it back to you even more and harder, right?
Uh,
So then when I started to play organized sports and stuff like that, I got good very quickly, because then it was okay to rage, right? It was
oh,
okay
that's
to
smart.
really kind of turn up, and it'd be okay, you know?
Yeah.
So I got
Encouraged. Yeah.
dominant very quickly in football and in wrestling and pretty much almost like everything that I did. But I was in a better place. I was in a safer place where I didn't have to be in fight or fight,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
much so, I'll tell you the story. It was 2018, and we moved into the place that we're at now. And I just remember, I don't know if the sound machine was on. This is like a new thing for us now because we have the kids. But it was 2018, and I was just laying there next to my wife, and then I had my eyes closed, and I just heard nothing. I felt nothing, and then I tapped her, and then I said to her, I was like, "This is the safest I've ever felt. This is the
Oh,
safest." Like, so that was recently. That was like
wow.
2018. I started feeling safe for the first
Yeah,
time, right?
for sure.
And it's probably you could relate to it, and your other alums could relate to that. When do you have this feeling that you actually feel safe, right? You got to get to a place where you truly feel safe, and then you could start working on yourself, start working on repairing yourself.
And I just want to address the other alum out there, the other alums that might be listening. That is not something I have accomplished. I live my life still in crisis mode. Like I am always trying to evade the next crisis. And to me, it's impending. In reality, it's not. It's not existent, it's just normal daily things. But I deal with a lot of that crisis mode, survival mode. I'm not as fight or fight anymore, but I've gotten to a point where confrontation itself, like if somebody asks me to come over for let's say a party. They're having a dinner party, okay? And they're
Hmm.
like, and it's just a damn dinner party, okay? And I'm
Yeah.
like, absolutely, I will be there. Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely, I'm gonna be there. I cannot wait because I really want to get invited. If you don't invite me, I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
gonna do, but I
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
not show up. The reason is because I'm still in, and I'll make some excuse. The confrontation part, the not being able to handle it, I'm not just going to not show up. And I'm certainly not going to tell you, I changed my mind. I don't want to come. Nope. I'm going to come up with something big, something valid enough to miss your party. Okay. I'll go put a dent in my own damn car. I just
Oh my
send you no,
God.
who knows? But I'll use an old dent and
Yeah.
say it's new.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are the kind of things, the living in fear. I know that we all go through it. And the going from, I think of myself in the past, I think, why am I so afraid of
Yeah.
confrontation, man? People thought
Hmm.
I was an unbaptized sailor the way I used to speak. Nobody got away with
Hmm.
talking down to me when I was a kid. Now I'm just
Yeah.
like, no, thank you. Just please back off. I don't, gosh,
Yeah.
sorry. My neighbor's mother died and I have to help them with
Hmm.
that. I can't come to your party because I'm afraid of that kind of confrontation. So those are things
Yeah.
that I'm working on. Those are things that are
Hmm.
important. Write a book, Sam. I want to
No,
read
I
it.
am.
You're
I am.
touching on so much.
I am.
You
No,
are?
I am
Okay.
gonna write a book. Yeah, yeah. So, but
Yeah.
you know what? What got me into foster care was a story in the eighth grade. I've shared this with you, and I just got to
Yeah.
share, with everybody else. But my eighth grade girlfriend, I would walk her home from school every day, and one day she told me, Sam, my stepdad is me after school. Right. And I just remember how it made me feel. And I was just so mad. And back in those days, that's my dropout prevention days. I was like, I'm going to punch this guy in his face. And she was just like, no, he carries a knife. And, it was weird and eerie because after school, I would walk her home and walk her over this bridge, and then you would see him in his truck, and he's kind of like circling around, kind of like waiting for her in a sense, um, and then obviously a couple days after, she ended up saying something, and that kind of started her journey through foster care. But just everything attached to that situation where you're supposed to be safe, right? And you're not.
Right.
Your mom is supposed to protect you, and the mom knew something was going on and she wasn't, right? What did she do to deserve that? She didn't do anything to
Nothing.
deserve it, right?
No.
And you just kind of take all of those situations into account, and it just bothers me, right? And still kind of bothers me till this day. And I was glad that she was able to land in a great home. And that's kind of when I was able to see what does a good home look like. And she kind of kept that relationship, with that family until it's still to this day.
Oh, wow.
And, that kind of all of that situation kind of really resonated with me. And I think that was probably the first big impact moment that, told me that I was probably going to head in this direction.
And it's so amazing that you kept in touch with her afterward. I mean, that's got to be inspiring too, because you did see the hell that we can live through. And then you saw a
Correct.
foster home give her a better life. So, I mean,
Correct.
it's an amazing, and you kept in touch with her and she's doing great today,
Yep.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. I'm still in touch with her. I'm
Wonderful.
still in touch with her.
That's
Yep, yep.
amazing. I find that I find that people who can be, I do get on foster parents a lot, but people have to
Of
understand
course.
that I'm coming
Hmm.
from somebody who, not only myself, but most of the people I talked to did not have a Sam
Hmm.
Dorvil. Okay. And we didn't
Hmm.
have a family unit. I mean, one of my foster families had their, 20 something year old son who was a registered sex offender pedophile,
Oh, wow.
who would he lived in the same 2 bedroom trailer as me, 3 other foster kids, and the
Oh, wow.
foster child that they adopted out, this awful human being. But anyway, whenever the state would come to check on us, and these were the ones that had me
Get hot.
working too at their
Yeah.
dollar store for 10, 12 hours a day, stocking, doing all
Hmm.
kinds of things. But when they would show up, he would go hide in their Rottweiler's doghouse. And the Rottweiler's chain
Mm.
length kept anybody out of there. That Rott was aggressive.
Correct.
And that's just one home. I am very proud of my foster alum who become foster parents.
Yeah.
That's such a
Hmm.
hard thing to do, because not just because of the bonding, but because we know
Hmm.
what they're going through so deeply.
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
just a movie. It's not just, and people,
Hmm.
they hear our stories and they think maybe we just watched a movie with that scene in it. But where do you think they're
Yeah,
getting these
for
movie
sure.
scripts? This is real life. I mean, we've
Real
experienced some
life stuff
things
here.
that, yeah, the disempowerment. So to come forward, Sam, to become empowered after everything you've gone through, it
Yeah.
is inspiring. I will be the first person to purchase your book, and I want it signed. I want a
No, for
little
sure, for sure,
letter.
for sure. No, when I get it done, that's definitely on my list. It's I have to have a ghostwriter just because I will share so many different stories that it don't even it'll make your head spin.
That's yeah, I agree. People always ask me why I haven't written my memoir, and I'm like, oh, well, I have a bunch of them.
Hmm.
They're all
Yeah,
disorganized.
exactly.
I can't place it together. My memory doesn't serve me like that. I'm like, wait, how did these two
Hmm.
chapters? That doesn't make sense. When am I going to figure this
Yeah.
out? So I need a ghostwriter. That's really smart.
No, you do. You do. That's
Yeah,
kind of how you're gonna move the needle.
yeah. Because I could again tell these stories all day and just not even know where I'm going with them. If somebody could gather and organize that
Yeah.
for me, anybody listening out there
Hmm.
who's feeling really
No, for sure.
charitable, because I'm not in that place right now. But uh,
Understood.
no, Sam, you are an incredible human being, and I want more of this,
It's all good.
the autonomy, the culture, the structure, the love. Hug your foster kids, okay? We're not untouchable.
Yeah,
Tell us that you
for
love
sure, for
us.
sure.
Give us this that community, that connection that Sam you have provided for yours. I'm almost living vicariously through the children in your home, almost like the way you're
Yes.
fostering them. You're giving them
Hmm.
what you wanted as a child. I'm telling you, you're giving them what I wanted to, and to be made aware
Yeah.
of that, it's an amazing experience.
No, thank you. But yes, we have a foster community that we've put together. So there's about I think it's about 6 families that are all in the same arena as us. They're all fostering families. Some of them are opening their houses, some of them are closing, some of them adopted, but it's about 6 or 7, families that have kind of grown together to create community. And that has been really, really good for me because I didn't come from a communal sort of standpoint. So that's why it's more important for me to create this community type thing,
Love that.
is because this is what I was lacking, and also too, I think the more and more that, I begin to drop my guard, I get to be the Sam that my wife knows though and has always known and understood. And that's not the Sam that I've shown everybody for years, but that's the
Sure.
Sam that I'm showing now. Right.
I love that.
And people are gravitating towards it because I'm open, I'm honest, I'm real, insightful, perspective, understand challenge, understand changes that are needed to grow, and committed to being a lifelong learner. Never stop learning, never stop adding tools to your toolbox. I highly recommend that for any and everybody, because I'm very, growth oriented. And visit those areas and those places that make you feel uncomfortable, and then isolate them, and figure out how you can work on them, right?
Yeah.
For the better,
Smart.
right? Because the reality is, we're wired to connect, we're wired to love people, and the closer, and the better that we could do that, the better that, we'll be as people. So that's just probably my words of advice.
Yeah, I love it. I want to say you've touched on so many great points, but for the people listening, love yourself. Love yourself so much that you want to create a better life for other people like Sam is doing right now. He's creating the kind of life he would have loved for himself because he loves himself. Don't be afraid. Don't call that selfish. You can only love the world when you love yourself. So when you love yourself enough to say, I didn't deserve what happened to me as a child. I didn't need that. That wasn't my fault. And I'm going to do my best to make sure it doesn't happen to another child. And I'm going to live through that. That's okay. You're live through it. Let it be a cathartic experience. We have lived experience, and it's what we are masters at. So when you go out there and you want to affect the world, make sure it's something that you really know, that you're mastered at, okay? That you've experienced, something that you want to change because it should have been changed for you. I love that. And it's something that I'm working on, loving my little child, my little inner child.
For sure.
And it's given me a lot of compassion. I've taken a lot of walls down because of it.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, Sam,
No, I
go ahead.
No. I was gonna say I had to do the same, right? I had to, I had to, for the longest time, I carried myself in a way that, people, I have a resting B face, right?
I do too.
When I'm
I
not
try to smile now.
right?
I do too.
And then it could be perceived a certain type of way. People be
Yeah.
like, is he angry? Like, no, I'm not
I
angry.
get it
But
all
I probably had to I probably had to carry myself like that to just don't mess with me, or you're gonna get it, right?
Yeah.
And these are just like little things. So now I smile more to kind of like soften my my approach up. So
Yeah. I do too now.
don't
It's those looks that you don't know. It's when you don't know. That's why it's called
you don't
resting.
you don't know. You just don't know, but it's there, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's one
Well,
of those
Sam,
things.
I've just enjoyed this. I'm going to want to be back on yours and have you back
No,
on
of
mine.
course. Of course, of course, of course.
You're an
I will. No problem.
amazing, you're empowering, you're amazing. Other Foster alumni need to hear this. It is possible, guys. People had good
It
ones.
is. It is. It
They
is. It is.
did. And
Yeah.
other foster parents, you're doing what you can. Understand this. The system is not in your way of providing a gentle, compassionate home. Okay.
Correct.
I know the system can get in your way for a lot of things. It gives you
Yes.
guys, it puts you in a box, kind of like that badge that a police officer wears. I lived with two of them. I used to get really mad at what they wouldn't do. And my foster father one time told me, this is why I can't do it, and pointed to his badge. So I get that you can only do what you're allowed to do. You risk a lot, but you can make your home compassionate. You can make it loving.
Yes.
You can make it understanding. You know what you're getting into. So when you do it for the right reasons. Do it for your inner child.
Mm-hmm.
Sam, thank you so much for being here today. I'm just so grateful for you, and I look forward to seeing you again.
No problem. Let me know when you want me back on. I'll jump on and we'll chop it up.
Absolutely. And to my Foster Fierce family out there, thank you again for tuning in. Definitely follow Sam Dorvil. He's the Pro Design Builder podcast. Great guy all around. I'm so appreciative. And until next time, stay foster kid fierce.